Well, here we are. Here's Mr. Marcus Allen, who's appearing at the Ben Emlyn Jones Dreaming Sources conference, if that's the right word. It was held, I think, recently in Oxford last week, maybe the week before. I'll leave a link to this source video below. Dreaming Sources, Marcus Allen. And now Marcus Allen is one of the people that has been spruiking this. The moon landing was faked for many years now. And I think he's got this sort of presentation, or he should have this presentation down pat. I don't think anybody's ever looked at it with a critical eye. If they have, they certainly haven't been bothered to comment about it or make a video about it, as far as I can see. So I thought, well, I'll give it a crack. I looked at this and I thought, this guy's clueless. He's talking absolute rubbish. So let's see what Mr. Allen has to say about the moon landing. Apollo moon landings, fact or fiction? Anomalies, inconsistencies and unexplained details, none of which appear in his presentation.
Thank you. What a delightful start. I hope it's as enthusiastic at the end, because I'm going to deconstruct, as Ben said, one of the 20th century's greatest events as a non-event.
The only thing he successfully deconstructs is his own credibility. By the time you finish watching this, I think you'll be convinced that this man has absolutely no credibility or whatsoever.
What we saw was not what we were told it was.
Yes, of course it was. Just think for a minute. I don't know if you were around in 1969, but I was. It was on all the television channels. The mission was tracked by the English from Jodrell Bank, by the Australians from Honeysuckle Creek and Parkes. It would have been tracked by several other Earth stations around the world. It would have been tracked by the Russians. It would have been tracked by the Chinese. Everyone would have been looking at this. Now he says, oh yes, well it's later on somewhere here. I don't know whether I'll include the clip, but he actually says, oh yeah, the Russians wouldn't have spilled the beans because they were more interested in getting a gas pipeline contract signed to supply gas to Europe. Well, what's supplying gas to Europe got to do with America? He says that the space race wasn't real. It certainly was. And you've got to bear in mind this was all done during the Cold War. And the Americans were getting left in the dust by the Russians with their space technology. You know, the Russians had the first man in orbit. They had the first artificial satellite in orbit, and the Americans were peeing in the wind, really, with their space program. And if the Americans hadn't been able to pull off what we all saw, the Russians would have been jumping up and down, regardless of what this man says, and it would have been a matter of national pride. They would have been shouting "fake" as loud as they could. So with the Chinese, I don't think the Brits would have stood by and said, look, the Americans want us to go along with this ridiculous story that they've landed somebody on the moon. I mean, we can't really do that, can we, chaps? Can I press you to another cucumber sandwich? You know, it's ludicrous nonsense. Anyway, I'm sort of getting a bit carried away there, a bit over enthusiastic. Let's get back to Mr. Allen.
But you can fool some of the people all the time.
Oh, it's not worth listening to this bit. Goes on to talk about fooling people with special effects. Got to bear in mind this was the 60s.
As we're about to.
Okay. Now, he is the publisher and distributor for Nexus magazine in the UK.
Budget is big enough. So we're going to have a look at the special effects budget.
He doesn't, of course. He looks at the moon landing, which he considers footage of special effects, but he doesn't talk about the special effects budget. You've got to bear in mind that it was an awful lot of money. There were 400,000 people involved in Apollo. They all have to be in on the hoax or the fake. It's ridiculous beyond words. But anyway, this guy, he's the publisher and distributor of Nexus magazine, which is one of these alternative codswallop magazines. You know, they say things like free energy is real, 9/11 was a hoax, you know, the sort of rubbish. And these sort of magazines, because none of this stuff is real, these magazines have to come up with these stories to sell magazines. And they just invent all this ridiculous rubbish. Anyway, he's going to tell us about Nexus magazine.
It's not the budget for special effects. Before we do that, as Ben said, I'm the UK distributor of Nexus magazine, and there are two types of people in the world: those who read Nexus,
and those with an IQ bigger than their shoe size, who think it's rubbish,
and those who are about to. We have over on the stand some extra copies. This is the latest issue. There are previous issues. You may not recognise this cover if you've been a Nexus subscriber and reader for a long time, because...
And after this long commercial telling us all about Nexus magazine and you know, you can buy copies there and, you know, subscribe to it and all that, he says he's not doing this for the money. But this rubbish does keep him on the presentation circuit. And it does give him opportunities to peddle his ridiculous magazine.
We changed the cover. It's an Australian magazine.
Oh yeah, they changed the cover. That's right, they did. They made it less shiny. So when you poke a hole in the corner and hang it up in the car seat, it's much more comfortable to use as arse paper. As arse paper. Because that's about all Nexus is good for.
Particularly in the UK. It's now available in America as well. So anybody listening from America, go to Barnes & Noble, you'll find it there. End of commercial. Because I only do this for the money.
Well, if he didn't, he wouldn't mention it, would he? If he were... He's just spent the last 2 or 3 minutes peddling the magazine and telling us where it's all available, in what countries it's available, and all this sort of stuff. And then, and then he says sarcastically, "I only do it for the money." Of course, he does it to sell the magazines. He does it to keep himself occupied in the presentation circuit.
As many people say, I wish it was for the money. This is not the way to get rich, guys. This is the way to find interesting things down the rabbit hole.
It's a way of filling your head with a lot of twaddle if you're unemployed. If you're sitting around, you've got too much time on your hands, and you read these alternative... I'm reluctant to use the word news. Magazines. There's a few of them around. I think New Dawn is one as well, and I do buy them occasionally just for a laugh. You can't possibly take them seriously. Certainly I wouldn't recommend anyone subscribe to these. 90% of what you're going to find in there is absolute rubbish, very much like this presentation. You know, I mean, have you ever heard anything so ridiculous? The moon landing was faked. So 400,000 people at NASA, people in different government agencies all over the world that would have been tracking it and keeping an eye on it, and television networks that covered every aspect of it. And okay, I'll end this clip here. Okay, here he is peddling some more twaddle. He's telling us all about a website you can go to if you want to fill your head with more of this ridiculous nonsense. I thought this was quite funny.
Doesn't have a good reading about it. Going to see lots of YouTube films. Moonfaker.com is Australia, it's Gerald White.
And it's all rubbish.
Takes on anybody who disagrees with his contention, which is the same as mine, that we never landed on the moon. I haven't covered Apollo 13, which was actually the capsule came down in the Atlantic. It was recovered by the Soviet Navy, taken to the Manx, picked up.
Apollo Apollo 13 going down in the Atlantic. It's picked up by a Russian Navy.
Americans and brought back, it's now on display in the Museum in Kansas. You haven't heard that story?
Haven't heard that story because it's ridiculous, bloody rubbish. He probably made it up in the car park.
No, I don't know.
You thought not, because this one's hot off the press, guys. He thought not. Yeah, hasn't managed to get that into the mainstream yet.
There's photographs of it.
Oh, really? Yeah, okay. He's telling us now there's photographs. There's photographs of what?
In moments, we handed over.
There's photographs of the Apollo 13 capsule taken in Murmansk, where it's being handed over to the Americans. Yeah, I don't know. This guy's in cloud cuckoo land, really. He doesn't show us the photos, of course. Does he show us the photographs, or are these... is this going to be photoshopped rubbish that's in the magazine that he's trying to peddle? You've got to bear in mind, with these alternative news, if that's the right word, magazines, there is nothing to all this conspiracy rubbish. They have to keep making up more and more fanciful yarns to sell these ridiculous magazines. And the Apollo 13 capsule coming down in the Atlantic, being recovered by the Russians, being handed over to the Americans in Murmansk, and there are pictures of that. It's probably an article in that bloody ridiculous magazine. Yeah, it's just nonsense. Okay. Alrighty. This one's going to be inserted, I think, between a couple of the clips that I wanted to join together, but where it sits is going to have to be where it sits. You get the gist of it anyway, that's the main thing. Okay, on with the next one. Okay, now here Mr. Allen is going to tell us that about Operation Paperclip, where the Americans managed to get some of the German rocket scientists to go and live in America and work on the American space program. These, of course, are real rocket engineers and scientists. They're not special effects people. If you're going to fake it, you're not going to need real rocket engineers, are you? You know, Von Braun is not known for his special effects prowess. And I think this is quite interesting. Just listen to what he says here. Listen closely to what he says about Von Braun and co.
Operation Paperclip, because a new description of the Nazi scientists imported into America had a new CV paperclipped onto their visa application, saying that they were good people and they weren't Nazis. They were Nazis. Werner von Braun was a major in the SS. Hermann Oberth was a senior scientist. They were all Germans who got America to the moon.
Did you hear what he said? He said they're all Germans that got America to the moon. They're all Germans that got America to the moon. He knows very well that the Americans went to the moon. There's two or three of these Freudian slips through this presentation, and of course I'll jump on every one that I've noticed. If you've noticed any more, let me know. I'll make some more clips and maybe redo the video and insert them as well. So remember, this is the Ben Emlyn Jones Dreaming Saucers Marcus Allen presentation. 15 minutes and 17 seconds, and he's just said Operation Paperclip. They've got the Nazi scientists, Von Braun and co. Remember, he was talking about special effects and faking it earlier. These are not special effects people, these are rocket scientists, and they are the German they are the German scientists and engineers that got America to the moon. Hang on, let's just wind that back just a tad. Let's hear him say that again. Okay, so we'll take it back to, let's take it back to 15. How long does it take to say that? Okay. All right, well, okay. There's 1502. Let's just hear Mr. Allen say that again.
We were Nazis. Werner von Braun was a major in the SS. Hermann Oberth was a senior scientist. They were all Germans who got America to the moon. They were all Nazi Germans as well.
Yeah, well, whether they were Nazis or not is irrelevant. You know, he just said they were all Germans that got America to the moon. So, really, he should end his presentation there, because he's just said they were the German scientists that got America to the moon. Okay, let's end that clip there. Not looking good for Mr. Allen so far, is it?
Okay. You may recall a gentleman by the name of Carl Sagan, who was a very good communicator, and he popularised one particular phrase.
A very good astrophysicist as well, wasn't he, Carl Sagan?
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Yes, they do. It's a phrase that I've used a few times, and Ben Emlyn Jones actually doesn't like that phrase. He thinks that phrase is hilarious. He doesn't actually sort of laugh at Mr. Allen, though, does he? He doesn't say to Mr. Allen, oh, not that old chestnut. I can't hear Ben making a fuss about that at all. I think it's a perfectly sensible statement.
Which is a very sensible thing to say.
Yeah, exactly.
So what we're going to look at
But Mr. Jones doesn't agree with that, of course.
is some of the claims for the moon landings. Because in the moon landings there are many strange anomalies, inconsistencies and unexplained details.
In his opinion.
We're going to be having a look at some of that. Because if this was the event we're told it was, it should stand up to scrutiny.
And it does.
It should be able to stand up to any investigation. Let's start with the investigation. This is where it completed. National Geographic, the world's top-selling magazine at the time, this is the edition from December 1969. Now, to many people, this is all going to be history. This is all something that happened 50-odd years ago. December this year is the 50th anniversary of Apollo 8, which orbited the moon, we're told. And
again, you know, plenty of people would have been tracking that. That's historical fact.
People, Genesis, and everybody got upset. And you've got this phenomenon where we're told, we're being forever told that Apollo was the great start of the space race. Going back to 1961, the date on that is April the 21st, 1961. Life magazine, another American publication, with on the left Yuri Gagarin, on the right Nikita Khrushchev, who was at the time president of the Soviet Union, which is now a defunct country. It's called the Russian Federation today.
All this is completely irrelevant, of course.
It's that event of Yuri Gagarin orbiting the moon.
Yuri Gagarin orbiting the moon. I really don't think so. I wonder if that might just have been a slip of the tongue, maybe. Maybe he's a bit nervous because he's in front of an audience. He shouldn't be. He's done a lot of spruiking of this nonsense. But of course, Yuri Gagarin did not orbit the moon. Yuri Gagarin orbited the Earth. He was the first man to do so.
Which spurred America, in the shape of President John Kennedy, to make his famous announcement in May 1961, 6 weeks later, 6 weeks after Gagarin had done his orbit. Kennedy had to come up with something. He'd only been president for 4 months at that point. His inauguration was in January 1961. Young, dynamic, charismatic president.
He knew him, of course. He knew him personally, and he knows he was dynamic and charismatic.
And Russia was showing up something wrong, so he had to make an announcement. We're going to land a man on the moon before the decade is out and return him safely to the Earth. That was his promise. Of course, 2.5 years later, Kennedy was assassinated. We still don't know who by, but he was assassinated.
Again, that's his opinion. You know, this is Nexus's point of view. Again, it's more twaddle.
But at the time we made the announcement in 1961, a lot was going on in America and around the world. We had the so-called space race. There was no race, it was a media invention to sell newspapers, basically.
That's completely untrue. There was a real space race. The Americans were getting left behind. The Americans were very nervous that the Russians could orbit a satellite. They orbited Sputnik, they orbited Gagarin. Now, the technology required to do that meant that they could also launch heavy warheads. They could launch nuclear weapons from Russia to America. They could deliver nuclear warheads to American targets. This made the Americans very nervous. And the Americans had to ramp up their space program so that they could at least match that capability. If you can put a man in orbit, you can deliver a warhead anywhere on the planet. Is basically the bottom line there. The space race was very real.
America and Soviet Union at the time were cooperating.
No, they weren't. In the 60s was the height of the Cold War, and I mean, if you look at this is a demonstration of the press telling everyone there was a space race on, and that's because there was a space race on. If you look at that picture there, you know, Kennedy and Khrushchev arm wrestling there. Do you think they? Do you get the impression they're cooperating? Remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, where it very nearly led to World War III, where the Americans blockaded or quarantined, I think was the word they used, Cuba, because Russia was setting up ballistic missiles on Cuba with nuclear warheads to wipe out America. This man has no idea. They were not cooperating.
This is a Gemini mission.
Okay, now what he's going to say here is... So I have actually watched this through. Painful as it was, he's going to say, what's this thing here? Don't you think this would have been burnt off during re-entry? So not only is Apollo fake, Gemini's faked as well. Everything's faked! Of course it's got to be. It sells magazines, doesn't it? You know, if there's not a bit of drama, a bit of intrigue, you know, no one's going to buy these bloody magazines he peddles. They're full of all this sort of twaddle. Okay, well, if you look at the diameter of the Gemini capsule, we can only see a little bit of it here, so it's less than half of it. And you look at the length of that up to the first point there, this is telescopic. There'll be a smaller section there. This would have been in here. And when the thing touched down in the water, this would have popped off, this would have telescoped out, like that. And probably would have been a little radio beacon so they could locate it, maybe a comms antenna so they could actually talk to the aircraft carrier. There's no anomaly in that picture. That's perfectly explainable.
Small capsule landed in the Pacific. You've got 2 astronauts getting out, you've got 2 frogmen swung over from the helicopter. But what's this?
Yes. What's this big yellow arrow? It's a telescopic antenna. Would have been sticking out during re-entry. It would have been in here. You know, the distance between there and there is going to be smaller than the diameter of the spacecraft. It's going to be in here. It's going to telescope out. Yeah, this is... Now he's going down the Gemini. Could have been faked. The intrigue, the drama. The twaddle.
It looks like a direction antenna. So in case it landed a long way, of course, they could find it. Wouldn't it have got burned off? It comes back through the atmosphere. It's a bit of an anomaly. There is.
It's not an anomaly. It shows his lack of understanding of space technology.
There's an explanation for this, but it just is weird. It's the start of how things.
Oh, so he said apparently there is an explanation for this, but it's weird. But he doesn't tell us what the explanation is, because if he stood up there and gave us the logical explanation, the one that I've just given, all that intrigue, all that drama has gone, hasn't it? It's evaporated. There's nothing to it. So there, hang on, let's just move that back just very slightly there. Where are we? 2054. Let's make it 2044. There we go. 10 seconds. What does he say?
Comes back through the atmosphere. It's a bit of an anomaly. There is supposedly an explanation for this, but it just is weird. It's the start of how things are.
No. Apparently there's an explanation for this, but he doesn't give the explanation because it would kill his story. Really, it just it wouldn't be intriguing if he gave the explanation, because everyone would go, "Oh yeah, of course that makes perfect sense. It's a telescopic antenna, deploys after the spacecraft hits the water. Perfectly logical, perfectly understandable. No anomaly at all."
Neil Armstrong died in 2012. Neil Armstrong is probably the most famous American of the 20th century. Where is he buried? Arlington National Cemetery, you would expect, wouldn't you?
Well, I wouldn't expect anything. I would expect him to be buried where he told his family he wished to be buried. Where's he going with this?
That's where prominent Americans are buried. Presidents and such like. No, he's buried at sea, off the coast of Florida. He's a naval pilot, so maybe it's reasonable that he should be buried at sea. But it seems a bit odd.
No, not really. Yeah, he was in the Navy. I can understand him wishing to be buried at sea. The other aspect of that, of course, is that, as he's just said, you know, Neil Armstrong, very famous guy, first man to walk on the moon. The family may not have wanted him buried in a cemetery somewhere because people, you know, from the general public will go to look at the grave. And you know, I think Neil Armstrong was a very private guy, wasn't he? I think maybe the family just didn't like the idea. He may very well have said, "Look, you know, I don't want people coming and sitting around the headstone and all this sort of stuff. That people that I don't know. You know, if you wanted to come and see the headstone and put some flowers on it, you might not be able to get to it because there'd be half a dozen people sitting around it." I think that's perfectly understandable. I think they buried Osama bin Laden at sea, didn't they, for the same reason. They didn't want a physical spot on the planet anywhere where people could go and look at a headstone. No anomaly there. I don't think that's odd at all.
Maybe I'm just being a bit cynical. But if I do appear cynical and sarcastic, it's because I have. We have been fooled.
He left out Gormless there.
Humans cannot travel beyond the radiation belt which protects us.
And he knows this, of course, because he's an astrophysicist. And he knows all about travelling through space and travelling through radiation and cosmic rays in space. Oh, he's not an astrophysicist. I mean, he knows nothing whatsoever about it. This is just a layman's opinion. He's speaking with authority on something he has absolutely no understanding of.
Without a great deal of protection. What happened later. Right, we're on the moon. We're going to get out of our spacecraft. This is Neil Armstrong taking the photograph of Buzz Aldrin staggering, crawling out from the following well, the area is a bit further down. Notice how well lit he is. Notice how beautifully illuminated. Now, if Neil Armstrong was taking the photograph, obviously got bored stiff watching Buzz staggering out, so he decided to photograph the rubbish bag underneath the cloth. This is the sequence of photographs.
Yeah, okay, well, for a start, I might see if I can go back and show you the clip he's talking about I mean, you can pause it yourself and look at it just previous to this. Buzz Aldrin is coming out of the lunar module backwards. He's well lit because of the lunar surface. If you look at the lunar surface, you know, the lunar surface here is very bright. It's very bright. And you've got light reflecting off the lunar surface in an upward direction, and it's illuminating. You can actually see it illuminating. This is a crinkly surface on the spacecraft here, and the surfaces that are sort of under surfaces are being illuminated, and the surfaces on top are in shadow because the light is reflecting up. It's reflecting up off the lunar surface onto the spacecraft and onto Mr. Aldrin. And he does go on to say that, you know, there's no blast crater. Well, he's completely wrong with regard to what he says about that, but I'll leave a link below to someone that's got a much better explanation. There's got a bit of math as well to actually prove his case, whereas Mr. Allen here gives an opinion, but he gives no proof, gives no mathematics. He's got no calculations there to prove what he's saying. So you can put a line through anything he has to say about blast craters and thrust. He's completely clueless. But anyway, you can see there's a well-defined, I think there's very well-defined depression in the ground there, where all the dust has been blown out as the rocket motor, as the spacecraft descended. He's calling this a rubbish bag. Now, I don't know if that's a rubbish bag. Did NASA call this a rubbish bag? Maybe this is the bag that contains the pole for the flag, you know, in a few sections, and maybe the curled up flag in there. And there, you know, Neil Armstrong has got out, and Buzz has thrown this out. Neil's just moved it out the way so that Buzz can come down the ladder without landing on it. And they're going to go and put the flag up. How does he know this is a rubbish bag? I suspect he doesn't.
It's not my choice. We'll show you the exact sequence later. Photograph the rubbish bag and where's the blast crater?
And again, I just showed you where the blast crater is.
This is a 10,000-pound thrust rocket here, which has slowed the craft down from its orbit speed of 4,500 miles an hour. Faster than any aircraft will travel even today on Earth. So you've got to have a rocket to slow you down. 10,000 pound of thrust, that's quite a powerful rocket. Oh, I hear you saying, no, they slowed it down. So it wasn't 10,000 pound, it was about 2,000 pound. And it was coming out of the nozzle here, which has an area of about 1,000 square inches. It's just over 30 inches in diameter. Therefore, it was only about £1 per square inch on the lunar surface. Rubbish.
Yeah, and that's what he's talking. Absolute rubbish. Lunar module weighed about 15 tons. It burnt about 7.5 tons of fuel descending down to the lunar surface. So it weighed, on Earth it would have weighed about 7.5 tons. On the Moon it's going to weigh a sixth of that. Remember, the gravity on the Moon is a sixth. So it would have been, the thrust on the motor would have been reduced to, I don't know, a bit over 1,000 pounds probably. So this guy's, again, talking out of his backside. He's absolutely clueless. He offers no evidence for what he's saying. He shows no math for what he's saying. This is just his opinion, and he's talking rubbish.
If you're coming down in a helicopter, would you expect the helicopter to turn its power off as it came near to the ground? No.
Actually, I think you do, don't you? When you're landing in a helicopter, you do actually reduce the power as you're coming into land. You have to reduce the power in order for the helicopter to drop. In the same way you have to reduce the thrust on a rocket motor if you're bringing a spacecraft into land. Yeah, this guy really is clueless. I can't believe that he gets so many people. So many people go along to pay money to see this guy speak, or to listen to this guy speak, and just look at this ridiculous presentation.
This would produce a fairly powerful blast, which should shift all this.
He doesn't know that. This is just his opinion. He's got no idea. Okay, let's run on a little bit.
All this dust stuff here, you can see that it's fairly dusty, because you see footprints later. But there's no blast crater. There's no indication that this thing was working.
Of course there is. There's a clear indentation in the ground under the lunar module. This guy sees what he wants to see, and he doesn't see what he doesn't want to see. Anything that doesn't fit his narrative is ignored. Which is true for most conspiracy theorists. They'll form an opinion and they'll spruik that opinion, and they never let the facts get in the way of a good story.
But it landed. Anyway, on with the photographs.
And again, I think that's very clearly you can see a depression in the lunar dust. Very clearly. See this indentation? Directly below the rocket motor.
He had to photograph the planets to make sure that they weren't damaged, so quite what they had done if they were. History doesn't relate. Oh, he's coming out a bit further now. Come back and take photographs of it.
Okay, so he's going to say that Buzz Aldrin here has got his hands on the rails, but his feet aren't in contact with the ladder. He's 10 feet up in the air. You know, would you do that from your garage roof? What you've got to bear in mind, of course, is 1/6 gravity. You're coming out backwards. He's got his hands on the rails. Of course, you'd reverse out, and you would swing down and you'd put your feet on the ladder, especially if you only weighed a sixth of what you do on Earth. I don't see any problem with this at all. Someone takes a picture or a couple of pictures while you're actually swinging out. There's going to be, you know, 1 or 2 pictures of you where only your hands are in contact, because you're in that swinging motion and it's a snapshot. I don't see anything wrong with that at all.
This is one of the most ridiculous photographs I have ever seen. He's supposedly on the moon. No atmosphere. He's in his spacesuit, which is cumbersome, difficult to move in. You can't see where he's put his feet.
Well, he doesn't know that. Has this guy ever worn an Apollo spacesuit? He has absolutely no idea how cumbersome it is. He's got absolutely no idea what the visibility would be like from inside that spacesuit. This is his opinion.
He's on a platform about 10 foot above the surface of the moon. He's going to come down the ladder, which he can't see. He
doesn't know that. He doesn't know that Buzz Aldrin can't see that ladder. He can't possibly know that. I think if you look at the angle that Buzz Aldrin is at when he's coming backwards out of the lunar module, and the size of the transparent visor part of the helmet on the spacesuit, I think Buzz could see the ladder. This is my opinion. I've never worn a spacesuit either. Just looking at it, I think that he could. He's looking at it and saying that he doesn't think he could. He doesn't know that. That's his opinion.
See inside the spacesuit.
How does he know what you can see from the inside of a spacesuit? Of course he doesn't.
His right foot is not touching the ladder.
So what? So what? He's in motion when the photograph was taken.
And his left foot has been kicked up. Would you come off your garage roof down a 10-foot ladder like that.
In 1/6 gravity, yeah, absolutely. He's got no understanding whatsoever of space, gravity, space technology. This man is completely clueless.
Of course you wouldn't. You'd be looking to make sure that you've got a proper foothold before you move at all. And there's a big...
Now he's talking as an old guy getting off of the roof of a 10-foot garage on Earth. And under those conditions, he's absolutely right. You'd make sure you got a good foothold and you grabbed on and everything else. But a young guy in 1/6 gravity on the moon, coming backwards out of a hatch onto a ladder. That's perfectly reasonable.
Difficult to see it on here, but there is padding on the ladder.
Very, very, very similar to the padding around the walls of where he lives, I would think. Okay, now this is another picture that he spoke about earlier on. And I don't think I commented on this, but if I did, apologies. But you know, I'm doing these clips at different times on different days, and I'm not going to sit down and spend some considerable time editing all this together seamlessly. So if I've said this before, I do apologise. Now, he's saying that there's another light source for this photograph, because this is the shadow of the lunar module. This is Buzz Aldrin coming down the ladder. He's in the shadow of the lunar module, yet he's extremely well lit. And he says that there's another light source. If you look at the shadow on the top of the backpack, I think it shows fairly obviously that he's illuminated by light reflecting off the lunar surface. Look how bright the lunar surface is. The light's coming off the lunar surface and it's reflecting upwards. Okay, you've got a shadow from the lunar module coming out here somewhere, but all around there it's going to be super bright, just like this lunar surface here. Remember, it's not flat, it's not smooth, it's all bumpy and jagged. The light's going to be reflecting off in all directions, and it's reflecting off the ground up at Mr. Aldrin. You can see it's crinkly stuff on the spacecraft, as I mentioned before, and the undersides of the crinkles are illuminated and the tops are in shadow, showing the light is coming up from the lunar surface. So I don't see anything wrong with this picture at all. Again, the light coming up from the lunar surface is illuminating the inside of here and showing the hatch. If there was a studio lighting, or another light source, as Mr. Allen is suggesting, I think you would get some strange shadowing. You know, if there was some light coming in, maybe from here or to the right of the camera. Did he say? I think he said. If he said there was some light, a light source at the right of the camera, I think he was referring to that image. There'd be a shadow of that leg on that leg, wouldn't there? There's no shadows here on the ladder, is there? The only shadow is on the top of his backpack, which is exactly where you'd expect to see it if the light was reflecting up off the surface. I don't see anything wrong with that picture at all. Okay, well, I think that will do for this clip. On to the next one, where I think he's talking about some strange shadows. Okay, this might be worth a mention.
Showing Earth.
It's Earth there, the little thing there.
How did they take that photograph? Think about it. The Earth, when viewed from the moon, will be more or less overhead.
Yeah, okay. So this bloody computer is driving me mad, but let's just see if we can get that bloody image back without losing the spot again. Okay. Right, there's the two images he's talking about. There's the back of the lunar module, and there's the Earth, which is pretty much overhead. And he says, how could they take these photographs? Well, I would think that, are they leaning back at a 45-degree angle to take these pictures? So if you look at the landing strut there, I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that you lean against the strut, maybe unclip the camera from the suit and just point it up. Remember, it's a wide-angle lens, so you're going to get the earth in. How did he get the earth in? He's going to say, well, that's how you would get the earth in. Maybe it was a different camera. Maybe it was a camera other than the camera used that they used that was clipped to the spacesuits. I don't think it's. I think this is not a point at all. It's pointless. Look at these two images. How did they manage to take that picture? I don't think that'd be difficult at all. As I said, you can see the strut there. Could very easily. This bloody Norton thing. This could very easily have been taken by taking a camera off the suit, just pointing up in the sky and taking the pictures using a different camera. Remember, there's only 1/6 gravity on the moon. Maybe one of them did lean back and the other one stood behind him to support him while he took the picture. Took the pictures. You know, I mean, if that was you, how would you take them? I don't think that would be particularly challenging, to be perfectly honest.
How did they take that photo? Think about it. The Earth, when viewed from the moon, will be more or less overhead. Because when we see the moon from Earth, we see the full face of the moon. The moon orbits the Earth.
Yeah, I think that's. I'll stop that there. I don't think there's much point continuing with this particular argument, if that's the right word. I think this might be worth a look.
It's a very weird situation.
There's nothing weird about any of this. The weirdness is in his head.
Anyway, here are our heroes. Top one, Buzz Aldrin, bottom one, Neil Armstrong. And I put it in that format because this was taken from a book bought at the Kennedy Space Center, with a NASA publication. And it reads, astronaut Edwin Aldrin inside the lunar module after his moonwalk. That is a lie. If you find the original of that photograph, it was taken before they even reached the moon.
That is a lie. That was taken before they even reached the moon. Yeah. Before they even reached the moon. Okay, so this is I'll put a link to this source video. There we go, and that's 52:33. Ben's video, Dreaming Sources, Marcus Allen. So they did go to the moon after all, Mr. Allen. Well, what a surprise. Oh dear. He knows very well they went to the moon. He's only spruiking all this bloody rubbish to keep himself on the presentation circuit and to sell those ridiculous magazines. Okay, on with the next clip.
So these are the two astronauts, Aldrin and Armstrong. Why are the shadow lengths different? Why are the angles different?
Okay, let's have a look at this bit.
I don't know what these are. They're not lens flare. So, anomalies, unexplained details. Here is the famous man on the moon photograph.
Yeah, just out of curiosity there, or just, I mean, obviously this guy's legs are not different lengths, are they? Yeah, the shadows are different lengths. You know, this leg is not a foot longer than this one, is it? So his shadow argument, this picture here proves that his shadow argument is bloody rubbish, doesn't it? Just this picture. Okay, well that's not why I actually started that. It's very difficult to line these things up precisely. unless you put a lot of time and effort into it, and you know me, I don't do that. So let's just move on.
Same with bottom one here, Neil Armstrong, inside the lunar module as it rested on the moon's surface. Now, what you see in here.
Okay, so what he's going to say here is that the light shining in the eyes is indicative of the picture being taken with a flash. He then goes on to say they didn't have a flash with them. Well, how does he know that? I can't imagine it being terribly bright inside the lunar module. Maybe they did have a flash. How does he know they didn't have a flash? Mind you, they don't look like, you know, with a flash, certainly close range, you tend to get the red eye, don't you? A very prominent sort of red eye in the pupil. I don't see that there, to be honest. I mean, that might just be, you know, a light on the wall of the lamp, cabin lighting. Aldrin might just have been closer to it than Armstrong.
Highlight the light. This is indicative of a flash gun being used.
Yeah, maybe not. You know, maybe they had a flash. Remember, the interior of the lunar module was pretty small. If there's a couple of lights on the wall, you know, I reckon that could easily account for it. Just as easily account for it.
Have a flash gun. But a highlight of light in the eye, if you look at any paparazzi photograph of any celebrity, you'll see a highlight of light in the eye, because it indicates a flash gun is used to illuminate it. His teeth are also have a highlight there, which is the same thing. So this was taken under control conditions in the simulation rig before they even went through.
This was taken under simulation conditions before they even went to the moon. So that's his subconscious talking. He knows they went to the moon. He knows they did it. He's just spruiking all this rubbish because it keeps him on the presentation circuit, and he can drum up some interest for the magazine he peddles. Okay, so that's... I'll leave a link to this video. I'll leave a link to this video below, the source video. So, 5334. 5334. I'm just going to go back just a tad. Okay, I'm just going to go back to there.
What you see in here is a highlight of light. This is indicative of a flash gun being used. They didn't have a flash gun. But a highlight of light in the eye, if you look at any paparazzi photograph of any celebrity, you'll see a highlight of light in the eye, because it indicates a flash gun is used to illuminate it.
Wait for it, wait for it.
His teeth are also have a highlight there, which is the same thing. So this was taken.
Here it comes.
Under control conditions.
Under control conditions.
In the simulation rig before they even went through it.
In a simulation room before they even went to the moon. I don't know whether to end this video here. In fact, I might. I think this guy's, you know, 2 or 3 feet away from the podium there, because he's wearing those rather large clown shoes. And because they're about 2 feet long, he can't get any closer to the podium than that. Okay, I'll see what else is on here. Yeah, I may leave it there. Okay, here's another clip. Mr. Allen is going to talk about the pristine pad, the pristine landing pad, the photograph of the pristine landing pad.
And here is the pristine pad.
Okay, so that's one of the landing pads on the lunar module. And after this, he says, "Well, no one's ever told us that you know, lunar lunar dust won't stick to anything that's made on Earth. It's probably because it's not true. It's probably because lunar dust will stick to stuff that's made on Earth. But it won't. What he's getting at is, why isn't there any dust in this pad? This is one of the landing pads here. And the reason for that is, now if obviously he has as I've shown in this video already, he knows the Americans went to the moon. I'm going to leave a clip at the end, actually, just with the 3 clips together, I think, of him saying about the Americans going to the moon. His little Freudian slips. But whether he knows or not, I don't know. If he did know, he wouldn't tell you. I think the Gemini, the bit he did with the Gemini and the antenna coming out of the Gemini, saying that's an anomaly, wouldn't it have burnt off? It's trying to generate intrigue, But what actually happens with the lunar module is, from 3 of these landing pads, there are some 1.8 metre spiky things that sort of hang down. They hang down. There's not one on the pad by the ladder's on, because when the lunar module lands, these things bend out of the way and can get distorted. And if they had one on the pad that the ladder was on, it could be sticking up and it could puncture a spacesuit, or it could get in the way. So they only have 3 of these prongs on 3 of these pads. Now what these prongs do is they will illuminate a light in the lunar module. It's a contact light, and then the rocket motor, the descent motor, shuts off. So the lunar module comes down, it's reducing in thrust, it's burning off a lot of mass, because it's burning about half its mass in fuel while the thing's descending. It's not running very much thrust at all by the time it gets fairly close to the surface. It does enough to blow up a bit of dust, 1,000 odd pounds of thrust is coming out of here to lower it gently onto the surface, and the prongs touch the surface, and as soon as they touch the surface, contact light comes on, shuts the motor off, and the vehicle drops the last 1.8 metres without the rocket motor running. So the rocket motor stops. There's no air on the moon, remember, to hold the dust in suspension. So the rocket motor stops, and the vehicle drops the last 1.8 metres to the surface and squashes these prongs. And if you think about it, the first words actually said on the surface of the moon were contact light, because as soon as the prongs touch the surface, the vehicle is touching the surface, they are effectively on the surface of the moon. And that was, if you listen to the recording of the Eagle landing on the moon, you'll hear, I can't remember which one it was now, but one of them says contact light, and that told them that the vehicle, the prongs hanging down from these pads, had actually touched the surface. And then the rocket motor shuts off, and the vehicle just drops the last 1.8 metres. So the dust is not being blown up all over the place. For that last 1.8 metres, and because there's no air on the moon, the dust is not held in suspension. So there's absolutely no mystery at all as to why there is no dust in the footpads, the landing pads. More twaddle from Mr. Allen. Okay, on to the next clip. Okay, now Mr. Allen is going to show us a picture of Everest, and he will say that the picture showing the Everest base camp with Everest in the background has a similar distance and size relation to this picture here, and ask yourself, does it look the same or similar? And it doesn't. What he's saying is that the lunar module is where the Everest base camp would be, and this over here would be Everest in the background. It's about 2 miles high, about 2 miles higher than this position, and it's about 7 miles away in the distance. And he tells us that the Everest Base Camp, Everest is about 2 miles higher, and it's about 7 miles away, just the same as this is 7 miles away from the lunar module. And I'll show you that clip. That clip will follow this one, and I'll then show you on Google Earth that the distance between the Everest Base Camp and the Everest summit is actually only 4.4 something miles, might be 4.47 miles, about 4.5 miles, not 7 miles. So again, Mr. Allen is fudging the figures. You know, he fudges the light figures. It's only 8% light reflected off the lunar surface, and it can be up to 12. I mean, these pictures look quite bright, don't they? And the distance, he's saying that Everest is 7 miles away from the base camp, and it's actually only 4.5, because Everest looks so much bigger in the background, you know, when seen with the base camp in the foreground, than this does with the lunar module in the foreground, and that's because this is 7 miles away, not 4.5 miles away. So if you can imagine the following clip, Everest is another 2.5 miles away, further away. It might look a little bit smaller. We also don't know that this is 2 miles high. I should have actually looked at Google Moon and done a similar thing with that, but to be honest with you, it's getting a bit tedious. I think it's perfectly obvious that Mr. Allen is talking absolute rubbish. Anyway, let's now have a look at what he's got to say about this shot and Everest. Okay, here Mr. Allen is going to show us a representation of the distance between the Everest Base Camp and the summit of Mount Everest, which he says is 7 miles. He's comparing it with some pictures that were taken on the moon. And I'll show you a clip of the distance between Everest Base Camp and Everest Summit on Google Earth, following this clip.
Should be about 2 miles vertically above you. On Earth, this is what it would look like. Mount Everest is 29,000 feet. Everest Base Camp is about 19,000 feet. So it's 2 miles vertically above base camp. It's about 7 miles. As the crow flies, if there be any crows flying anywhere near Mount Everest.
No. It's actually about 4.5 miles. This guy wouldn't know a fact if it grabbed him round the throat and slapped him round the face. He really wouldn't. So there's either a clip following showing the distance between the Everest Base Camp and the Everest Summit, or immediately preceding this clip. On with the next one. Okay, Mr. Allen tells us that Mount Everest Base Camp, he shows us a picture of Mount Everest taken from the base camp, and he says this is about the same as the scene he just showed on the moon, and that the base camp was about 7 miles from the summit of Mount Everest. Anyway, here is Google Earth. There is the Mount Everest Base Camp, and I've used the ruler to draw a line to Mount Everest summit, and it is 4.47 miles. So again, Mr. Allen is giving us some highly suspect information. So he tells us, you know, that there's about 7% light reflected from the moon surface. It's actually about 12. He tells us that the distance between Everest Base Camp and the Everest Summit, as the crow flies, which is what this yellow line is representing, is 7 miles, and it's about half that, 4.47 miles. So it looks like Mr. Allen is sort of grossly distorting these figures and these numbers to support his ridiculous claims. Okay, on with the next clip. Now he's saying here that the lunar module is jumping around all over the place, and that these here are identical in both of these pictures, yet the lunar module is way over there. And the lunar module is jumping around all over the lunar surface. Well, no, I don't think so. I mean, if you look at that, and I'll leave, as I said, the link to the video below, and this is 106.06. They are not quite identical. The angles are slightly different, and I think if you imagine that angle there, you're standing behind the lunar module and you're looking that way, these structures are quite large. You then move yourself to there and look across there, you're going to see pretty much the same thing. That is slightly different if you look at that, so I don't think there's an anomaly there at all. And the other thing you've got to consider is these people are NASA, they're quite smart people. If they looked at those pictures and thought, oh my god, what idiot, took the fake LEM from there and put it over there, these pictures would never see the light of day. These are published photographs. I see no anomaly in those photographs whatsoever. I think if you were standing there in this picture, or effectively you'd be standing in this picture, and you took a picture that way, you're going to see the side of that, you're going to see that, you're going to see that coming like that, because you'd be close to the lunar module, remember, and you're going to see these fairly large structures to the left of it. I don't see an anomaly there at all, to be honest.
The lunar lander was not supposed to be moved once it came onto the lunar surface.
But indeed it wasn't, and it doesn't jump all over the place.
It jumps around all over the place. That's the lander. What's it doing over here? And these features are the same.
Thanks. What happened there? What happened there? Where did that go?
Yes. But it jumps around all over the place. That's the lander.
Are these two photos mutually exclusive? 106.17. And here you've got the lunar lander there, the car there. The car can move around, of course. And if you look at the angle of that, how much of this there is in this picture, and then you look at that, and he's saying basically, where did the lunar module go? Well, if you can imagine in this picture, you're taking it from here. The lunar module will be out of the shot. You're still going to get that slope, and you're going to get a little bit of that, which is exactly what appears in this picture here. So the answer to that question is no, certainly not. Okay, what else has he got to say?
What's it doing over here when these features are the same? This is ridiculous, and we're expecting...
No, it isn't ridiculous, and of course we're expected to believe it because we can look at the photographs, and if you can think three-dimensionally, or actually if you can think two-dimensionally, and just imagine the scene moving around as though you were on the surface with your camera, it makes perfect sense.
You can believe it, and we go along with it. If you want to believe the man landed on the moon, please go ahead and do so.
Yes, of course I do. I believe people like you are talking out of your backsides, ignoring all the evidence dreaming up all this distorted drivel to try and get your ridiculous point of view across. It's nonsense.
So, I believe in three things: Father Christmas, the Tooth Fairy, and the Easter Bunny.
Well, I think that tells us all we need to know about Mr. Allen. He lives in Father Christmas, the Tooth Fairy, and the Easter Bunny. So no wonder he believes the lunar module hops around all over the surface of the moon after it's landed. And that NASA fabricated this whole Apollo operation, and the 400,000 people that were involved in it were all in on the conspiracy. And not one of them has come forward to say it was faked. Yes, well, yes, I think that pretty much explains all we need to know, Mr. Allen. To be perfectly honest, I think I'll end the video there, unless I find anything else. That's a pretty good place to finish, isn't it? Okay. If there's nothing following this, thanks for watching. I'll probably catch you again. Yeah, actually, this is quite good. This is saying footprints but no wheel tracks. How did the lunar vehicle get there? Remember, there is 1/6 gravity on the moon, so this probably doesn't weigh very much. And it says footprints but no wheel tracks because the guys probably just carried it there. They've probably just taken it out of the lunar module, unfolded it all, and carried it over there, ready to go driving off somewhere. And I might even look up the weight of the lunar vehicle, so I could tell you what it would actually weigh on the moon. But it's not going to weigh very much. Two guys, I would think, would be able to lift that without any bother at all. Okay, no mystery there. Next. Okay, this is a track from the lunar vehicle.
You'd expect something weighing on Earth 450 pounds, on the moon about 60 pounds, about 70 pounds.
Oh, there you go. So he just told us that on the moon the vehicle weighs 70 pounds. So two guys could very easily lift that. Yeah, no mystery there.
You expect it to be the future.
And again, NASA are very bright people. You think if they were going to publish pictures of the vehicle on the moon, they would include tracks if it was faked.
Tracks. There are footprints there, but there are no tracks in front of it or behind it. Anomaly.
No anomaly whatsoever. None whatsoever.
This is what the tracks look like. We're trying to 1, 3, 4, 2, 0, 4, 0, 7, and then 6 photographs later we have the tracks. Or did they change the tyre, make it a different track?
Okay, so what he's saying here is that the imprint left by the wheel is different. Okay. I doubt they're rubber tyres. They're probably sort of wire mesh tyres. And I suspect they would be variable geometry, you know, so as they move around, the actual mesh structure of the wheels would flex and produce different patterns. I'll check that, but I suspect that's going to be the case. Either that or they're a slightly different pattern front to back. What we saw was the front, maybe. Yeah. Could even be, you know, the track's been run over a couple of times. Yeah, who knows? I'd put a line through that. I don't think that's anything to... I don't think that's evidence of a fake vehicle, faking the vehicle running around on the moon surface at all. I think that's just... No, it's more clutching at straws.
Herringbone pattern as opposed to square pattern. Again, anomaly, different. When Apollo 17 or any of them took off, they took off, and this was filmed from the camera mounted on the lunar rover, controlled from Earth by Ed Fendel, who was operating the camera on a 2.5-second time delay. And they got it to launch by pressing button A on launch, presumably, because suddenly it leaps up off here. Where's the rocket thrust? It's using hypercolic fuel, which is the same as used on the space shuttle, which is visible in space, but there's none visible here. And if you look at the launch pad, this is the lower section of it.
Not quite sure what that means. The fuel is visible in space, but it's not visible here. What does that mean? Are you expecting to see the fuel outside of the fuel tanks? I don't understand that, do you? I think that's gibberish. I think this is just more twaddle he's just thrown in for the sake of the presentation.
The Apollo 17 and the Apollo landers. Where did the exhaust go? That's not a hole. It's a flat surface. If you fire a 4,500 pound rocket...
Oh, yeah, okay. So, yeah, well, it's not... Look, if you actually look at the design of the lunar module, and I might leave a link to that below, the rocket, the ascent engine doesn't sit flat onto on the top of the descent module. There is a gap there, and you'll find that it's the diagram that he showed. It showed the top of the descent module being flat. It's actually scalloped. It's sort of scalloped out in 4 directions to allow the thrust to go out in 4 different directions, and the bottom of the ascent module is similarly scalloped. It sort of allows it channels for the thrust. So this is just another thing that he's either clueless about or he's deliberately ignoring. Okay, I'm getting a bit weary of watching this guy, to be perfectly honest.
Literally underneath you.
Yeah, he's got no idea what he's talking about. I'll see if there's anything else. Okay, let's have a quick look at this bit.
On the moon, this photograph is the only one I've found for many years. It shows an object moving across the lunar surface taken in 1966, i.e. before any alleged landings.
Okay. That's this thing here. Get rid of that line. Don't think I can I? An object. This was taken in before any of the moon landings. This picture was captured of this object moving across the lunar surface. Now this was taken 50 years prior to another picture he's going to show us, which I think is identical. I haven't actually counted the amount of little loops in the path, but I suspect it's just a rock that's broken off here, and it's just if you look at the shape of it, it's a rock, I'd say, and it's just rolled down here, and as it's done that, it's made a pattern in the dust. And I think if we looked at Google Moon, from there to there would be all downhill. It certainly looks that way, doesn't it? If you actually look at that picture, that looks like that's broken off there and it's rolled down there and it's stopped. Now he's got another picture of this, and if it's 50 years later and it's got the same amount of loops in it, I'd say that's all that is. It's a rock that's broken off and rolled down. So I don't think there's anything there. It doesn't look like a machine to me. Oops, where are we going with that? Yeah, that doesn't look like a machine to me. Okay.
There are 2 objects here. One here, small one here, big one.
I don't know if that's the same one from a different angle. One here a small one and one here a big one. So what's he saying? This one here, maybe? But that looks very much to me like the same thing from a different angle. And again, that looks to me like it's, if you look at these steps in the terrain, this is just, there's another boulder up here, look. This boulder was probably on the edge there, and it's just come loose and it's rolled down, it's shifted all this dust and crap out of the way, and it's come to rest there. And again, I suspect if we had a look at Google Moon, had a look at this on Google Moon, this would be much higher here than that is there, and it's simple as that. It's just rolled down and because of the shape of the boulder, it's made the pattern in the dust as it's rolled. I don't think there's anything more to that than that. Okay.
I don't know what they are, but they are leaving a track which identifies. I knew what it's a Vitello crater for the left-hand corner of the moon. A lunar reconnaissance orbiter went out. I thought I could find that image again if it exists, and it does exist. There it is 50 years later.
Okay, so this is an image from the lunar orbiter 50 years later. Okay, now I didn't count these little loops, these little rings, but that looks the same to me, so it hasn't moved in 50 years. It's a rock that's broken off and it's rolled down the hill. I think that's pretty obvious. Yeah, that's all that is.
Sun angle is different, but I don't know what it is. I know what I think it is, but let's not go there. We'll get back to Earth. You coming?
I think I know what it is, but let's not go there. Why not? You're doing a presentation to a bunch of conspiracy theorists. Why say that? Why say, you know, I think I know what it is, or I have an opinion as to what it may be, but let's not go there. Why not? I wonder if they did a Q&A afterwards and someone asked him what his opinion was of that. I think it's very obviously just a rock. If there's two of them, then it's two rocks. I don't think there's anything more to it than that. It's very close to the end, mercifully. I don't think I could stomach much more of Mr. Allen. Okay, well, if you've made it this far through the video, as always, congratulations. I'm going to leave you with my three favourite clips from Mr. Allen that prove beyond any doubt that Marcus Allen knows full well that the Americans went to the moon. Okay, regardless of what he says in his presentation, he believes they went to the moon. Otherwise you wouldn't hear comments like these. Now this is from the source video. Let's have a look at the timestamp. 51:55. Okay, let's see what he's got to say.
It's a very weird situation. Anyway, here are our heroes. Top one, Buzz Aldrin. Bottom one, Neil Armstrong. And I put it in that format because this was taken from a book bought at the Kennedy Space Center, with a NASA publication. And it reads, Astronaut Edwin Aldrin inside the lunar module after his moonwalk. That is a lie. If you find the original of that photograph, it was taken before they even reached the moon.
Okay, so there's the first one. That was taken before they even reached the moon. This is after he's told us that it's impossible to fly through the radiation. It's all faked. Okay, let's have the next one. Here's the next one.
There's a highlight of light. This is indicative of a flash gun being used. They didn't have a flash gun. But a highlight of light in the eye, if you look at any paparazzi photograph of any celebrity, you'll see a highlight of light in the eye, because it indicates a flash gun is used.
Oh, hang on, I forgot to show you the timestamp on the source video. There we are, it's 53:20.
To illuminate it. His teeth are also have a highlight there, which is the same thing. So this was taken under controlled conditions in the simulation rig before they even went to the moon.
It was taken under controlled conditions in the simulation rig before they even went to the moon. Okay, the next one. And again, all these Freudian slips, Mr. Allen.
ISS, Herman Oberth was a super.
He's talking about the German scientists that the Americans got working on the Apollo program. You know, von Braun and co. All the German rocket scientists. Note, not special effects experts, the German rocket scientists. Now, just listen to what he says about the German rocket scientists.
English scientists. They were all Germans who got America to the moon. They were all not.
They were all Germans that got America to the moon. He's really not doing very well, is Mr. Allen, is he, with his presentation? What more can I say?